What's up, Penn State fans? The Nittany Lions are closing in on the 72-hour mark to kick off with Nevada to start the 2025 season. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel from Blue White Illustrated. It's Wednesday, August 27th. And as always, today's show brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody will get you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Spring by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour at undefeatable prices every day. Be sure to check out their Harrisburg and York locations. The Harrisburg one's pretty sweet. I've been to it. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Thank you for being the sponsor, Academy, of today's BWI Live. Again, I'm Greg Pickel. That's Thomas Frank Carr. And T. Frank, how we doing? The season is almost here, buddy.
Ooh, it's starting to mount, like you stack one thing on top of the other, and pretty soon, like you're looking over top of it. That's where we are with football. It's right in front of us, and I'm excited. There's a lot of work to do between now and the game. We've got our tailgate show coming up at 12:30, so we're going to have a great show there, giving you some of the insight and information we want to talk about, and a lot of that stuff we're going to be talking about throughout the week. Of course, we got our recruiting show tomorrow, which is going to focus on players that are going to be at the game, but also we're going to give our game predictions tomorrow on the show, so if you want to know what we think of the score and all that stuff, tune in tomorrow. But what I'm excited for is one of the first bits that we did here on the show. One of the first things of segments that I wanted to create on the BWI Live show with Ryan, all the way back when we first started this, was Best Bets. It's back. I'm excited for this. So stick around for the end of the show. It's now Greg Pickel's Best Bets coming up at the end of the show. So got a lot of great stuff coming up on the show and on the channel this week. So if you have not yet, like this video, subscribe, all that great stuff. We're talking about Penn State football, and there's lots to talk about, including practice tonight.
Yeah, and if you're a subscriber to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you learned last night over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com a bad bit of news for a Penn State receiver. Earlier this year, Sean Fitz reported at the start of training camp that Penn State receiver Caden Saunders would be out for a while with a long-term injury. There's now a second receiver who unfortunately is on that list, Josiah Brown, a guy who got a little bit of buzz during training camp before suffering what we now know is a long-term injury, is going to be out for an extended period of time. T. Frank, it's a shame. He's dealt with obvious injuries throughout his career, or earlier in his career. I shouldn't say throughout, but earlier in his career. Now, unfortunately, is dealing with another one that will cause him, a setback, obviously, in his push to playing time at Penn State. Yeah,
and it's something that James Franklin talked about kind of in an oblique angle, not necessarily Josiah Brown, but it applies to him, talking about Taymir Robinson and the pressure that guys feel when they come into college with an injury and they can't contribute right away. Josiah Brown had that. Now, I think he was further along where he was able to do some things his freshman season, but if you're not hitting the ground running and not hitting the ground running as an early enrollee, a lot of times you feel behind. One of the reasons we talked about Chaz Coleman the way we did is because he was coming in May, despite all the things that we would think about him. The fact that he is incorporated himself into the lineup so quickly is an anomaly because of a lot of these things. And for Josiah Brown, another year and another setback for a guy that has a lot of talent, but was very raw coming into Penn State. This is just, it's another frustrating setback for him and for his career, which he needed these years early to develop and bank that understanding of the game. And, mentally he can do all those things, but it's the reps that really matter. Yeah. And then, I guess, like, from the season perspective, do you think he was going to be part of special teams? How did you view if he had a role on the team this year? Because I think most people will say immediate impact, whatever. But, right. I guess, was there an area you thought that maybe he would be contributing to this team this year?
I think the most disappointing thing is he didn't get a chance to prove whether or not he could do that, because obviously this setback is going to take him off the field for the part, a good chunk of the season, I'm sure, but also the main part of the season where guys who entered it further down the depth chart, as he did, not one of the top 6 pass catchers in that room for Marcus Hagans, will still likely get some time in at least one of these non-conference games, if not more. to have a chance to showcase that they deserve a bigger role. So, no, I mean, he was mentioned briefly by Justin Lustig in the conversation regarding the punt returner battle. And obviously, we know there's guys at the top of that: Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena, the returner, Zion Tracy at returner. So I don't know if he was going to have ever a chance to really get a touch there, but maybe. I mean, again, when you're starting with Nevada, then have FIU and Villanova, guys further down the depth chart were going to or are going to get a chance, and he was going to get a chance to at least get some snaps and be evaluated on game tape, not just practice tape. So no, did I expect anything immediately? No. Was it possible, based on some of the things we heard, that maybe he carved him out some kind of a role, or himself out some kind of a role over these first 3 games? Yeah, no doubt. Especially as a guy who redshirted last year. So it's just a shame for him, and we hope he recovers quickly, of course, and see what the rest of his career holds. But yeah, that's the unfortunate news to start today's show. And obviously you lose a guy who works on your developmental squad as well.
Yeah, and Penn State needs speed in their receiving room. I'd probably talk about this more than and make it seem like more of an issue, but it is one ingredient they don't have in spades in this particular lineup. And if you were going to carve out a role for yourself on this particular 2 deep, it would be as a deep threat specialist, as a guy who could stretch the defense vertically in an elite sense of they've got a lot of guys that can do that, but then to be a specialist in that, Josiah Brown had great track speed, football speed he needed to work on and kind of put the 2 together, but he was a guy that had those skills. And now it's just one less player on the roster that you could maybe see having a development curve like that. So, that's, I think, to me, kind of the long-term view is they need some of those guys to develop, and, maybe even not for this year, but it's just a setback of finding one of those guys to be a part of the roster and another of those redshirt freshmen dealing with injuries. Because I know that there's a lot of people excited for Matt Otten and for Kobe Howard and Lyric Samuel, but we talk about this a lot of times, like the way the roster breaks down and the class stratification. You want to have older guys. You want to have them at some point be ready to go. And when you miss on a year, it creates a hole in the roster, and then you expect more out of young guys maybe before it's fair, which is where they are right now. Just these are more big picture or long-term issues that can be solved by 1 or 2 guys beating the development curve. And I think Kobe Howard has been showing that. But, these, I think, are the accumulation of things that happen over time that lead you to maybe a place you don't want to be as a particular room or whatever. And not trying to overstate anything with Josiah Brown, but just kind of those layering of issues and facts and how his career outside of him individually affects the team.
Right. And so, like we said, hope he recovers quickly. The second Penn State receiver to have a long-term injury reported during training camp, with, again, Caden Saunders being the other. So that's our news segment for this edition of the BWI Live Show. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. We are going to be out at practice tonight in State College, our first game week practice. Obviously, a big difference, not just because the game is at the end of the quote-unquote rainbow or week, but also, T. Frank, because this will be our first chance to see the team broken up into their developmental squad, scout team, whatever you want to call it, and the guys who would be the quote-unquote travel roster if Penn State was traveling somewhere this weekend. So what are you looking forward to seeing tonight in State College as Penn State hits the practice field for one of their final padded days of drills before game day?
So I'll tell you exactly how it goes. And how we get let into practice. So at first, we're all standing at the gate, whole media herd of people standing there like cattle in the pen. And then they open the door and let us out into the pasture being the practice field. And I immediately, and I'm not kidding, run jog down to the offensive line. I think just watching those combinations as they practice in the individual drills tells you a lot about where guys are maybe on that day. We've seen them mix and match a lot, so it's been a lot of have context about these things. But this week is when we're going to find out who's the right guard, who's the right tackle, who's the backup right guard, who's the backup right tackle. All that information, there's a certain point they're not going to be able to obscure that anymore because they need to practice and get ready for the upcoming game. And we have a rough idea. We kind of know what's going to go on there. At the same time, you want to get that visual confirmation. So for that's the thing that I want to know there. And then after that, it's just what are they practicing? They do things in a way to practice things in segments. And if you're paying attention, you can kind of get a sense of what maybe is on the docket this week. So for me, on the offense, I usually handle the offensive side of practice. Those are the things that I'm looking for. And, of course, who's QB2 hasn't been announced. James Franklin declined to announce it Monday during his press conference. We assume it's Ethan Grunkmeyer. That's been the QB2 for like 3 weeks now. Again, visual confirmation if you want to, do a good job and confirm these things and not just assume, even though it's strong, backed up by evidence sort of speculation. Those are the things we're finding out this week. And then I think the main thing, Greg, is who's available, right? That's one thing that we'll be doing at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is who's at practice, is anybody banged up, and then, who's playing where.
Right. And so BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, it's $1 for the first week of access, then billed annually from there. At BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, we'll also get a full year of access to the Athletics. So check us out today, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where we'll have practice reports later today, and you can join. This will get you practice reports from this week. That'll get you practice reports from next week, and it'll get you all of the game and recruiting coverage leading up to, during, and after Penn State takes on Nevada to open its 139th season of college football. The first meeting between those two teams takes place Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. T. Frank, the one thing I will say is when we get out there tonight, you hit on kind of the main talking points. So when you go over to that defensive side of the field, I think one big thing, and it plays into what you're talking about there, is the defensive end setup. We've seen Josiah Fisher in and out during our chance to see practice during the preseason portion of camp. James Franklin said Monday that he's still working his way back through his injury. And I'm just curious to see if he's out there or not. And that's probably the first thing I am going to do when I get out there. And I want to get to Zach's super chat here because I hate ignoring those and not getting to him fast in the comments. But so let me just stop the practice talk for a second. T. Frank, you're the expert on this. Zach asked, thanks for the super chat donation, Zach. How packed is Fragile and John's get? I don't want to be mind numb. Love you all. Keep up the good work. I'll let you answer that. Yeah.
Zach was wondering because he asked, where's a good place to eat? He's coming in for the game. And the first place as far as quality goes, Anti-Fragile and John's. We love suggesting that to people for coming into games. I will plead ignorance here because I am laser focused on game day. And so I am going to my location. I'm doing my show. I'm doing it with expert mercenary efficiency, or at least as close as I can get to it. And then I'm going back home to do things here. I've rarely tailgated in my life. So I can't tell you exactly how busy it is, but if you're going to... Game day's busy no matter what. They're downtown. They have a somewhat limited footprint just by the size of the location. So I've been there on a Friday. And it also depends on when you're going. I've been there on a Friday, and you can walk in on a Friday afternoon. You can find a place to sit. You can get something to drink. You can get a cheesesteak. No problem. But our subscribers and our viewers here on the channel are unbelievably awesome. They're very loyal, and they want to help out where they can. So we point a lot of people to Anti-Fragile. And so we've gotten a lot of positive feedback that when they go, they have a great time. But we also have sent a lot of people there. So I can't say that you're going to just walk in and walk out. It's a game day, so you should probably expect traffic and lines and things like that, no matter what. This is a small town, and when you import 100,000 extra people and more, those things tend to happen. So I would say that, it's not going to be one of the places where you're standing in line for 3 hours to get in and then you're waiting in for 45 minutes to get a drink. But it is a place that, it's game day, and there's going to be people that want the best cheese steak in Happy Valley. So hope that answers your question, even though I did my best to do the politician of answer your question, but not answer your question.
You nailed it,
and also
buddy.
Be as honest as I can.
You nailed it. You nailed it. All right. This is the BWI Live show, Wednesday, August 27th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. Speaking of coming to State College, if you're coming through Harrisburg or York, Academy Sports and Outdoors carries all the gear you need from the top brands at all the prices you'll love. Now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com. Orders. Want to save even more every day? Open and use Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card to get 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors and have fun out there. And we hope you have fun out there today listening to this show. And then as you get ready for game day, however you're going to spend it, if you're coming to Beaver Stadium, we have a ticket idea you might want to hear before we get into the rest of today's show.
And you should do it pretty soon, because I'm imagining as far as the non-conference slate goes, this is probably the hottest ticket there. So don't buy something game day from somebody in the parking lot with jacked up prices. Don't go on. I saw somebody the other day who bought parking on eBay, and it turned out to be not parking, because of course scams are a thing. If you've been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets, Jim at TixmanJim.com. He's been doing this for a long time. He's had 2 websites at this point. He's been doing it so long. Formerly PSUTixman.com. If you were familiar with that website, it's now TixmanJim.com. He's been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchased is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your 2025 season tickets now. Get your Nevada tickets now. Don't wait. Don't wait till day of. Don't be one of those people that likes to, they love the thrill of whether or not they're going to get in. You're probably driving minimum 3 hours, because everywhere in the world is 3 hours from State College. Don't wait here and then be like, oh no, I can't get in. And then you're at the mercy of whatever ticket you can find. Get them now for the whiteout, for your games in November, even if you want. Plan ahead. Go to TixmanJim.com or email Jim at TixmanJim@gmail.com. And of course, if you're watching the video, Greg, subscribe. Make sure you share this with your friends, because we're getting into the good stuff. I'm going to do my first video demonstration here on the channel, and I'm nervous, but I'm also excited for it.
I'm looking forward to it. Late add to the rundown. That means it's going to be a good one. Just a couple of quick thoughts on practice stuff, T. Frank. We mentioned seeing who's out there, mentioned obviously the QB2 situation. The other thing I'm interested in trying to get a read on as we get into this game week is freshmen. Obviously, James Franklin talked on Monday. I'm sure you guys covered it in depth yesterday that Chaz Coleman and Darius Dixon are the 2 Penn State freshmen, first-year guys, who are greenlit to play this season. But there's some other guys who are very much in the conversation as a yellow light, who they're going to try and probably play in 2 games, or if the first game goes so well, more during this 3-game non-conference stretch. And then those guys will either put themselves in position to either green light or not, based on how things go and the 4 games you can play before the 5th burns your red shirt in the regular season, things like that. So how do we figure that out? Well, you'll have your scout team numbers and you'll have your regular uniform numbers. And sometimes it gets a little bit screwy trying to figure out who's who, especially on the first day that this takes place. But certainly interested to see which freshmen still have their own numbers, because it's a bit of an indication, obviously, that they could see time on Saturday, and that more than likely than not, they're in that yellow light conversation.
Yeah, and I would say maybe I'm paying attention better this year, or maybe Penn State made this distinction a little bit earlier in camp than previous years, but I feel like they split pretty early in camp. They were into more serious work. It felt like more like a regular season mode about 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. We were seeing before in the offseason, I should explain, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they would have 3 separate pods for the quarterback. So you'd have the freshman quarterbacks, maybe some of the run-on players. Then you'd have the 2-3 battle in the middle with all of the 2 offense, and then you'd have the number 1 offense, the transfer receivers, Drew Aller, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Nick Dawkins, in a top group working on handoffs and things like that. Pretty quickly into camp, they just squished that back into the 2 different pods with the 3s and some of the run-ons, and then the 2s and the 1s in one group. So I feel like we had a really clear idea of who the top receivers were, who the top tight ends are. That will be the surprise, if there are any surprises from what we've seen from training camp. Maybe somebody didn't quite make that cutoff, and maybe some guys that spent some time in those top groups, maybe they did eventually make it up into that top group.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see what we learn about that and much more tonight at Penn State practice. We're going to have full coverage of that. And then later here on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to watch James Franklin's full news conference, his final time meeting with the media. He will do the radio show tomorrow night with Steve Jones, but with reporters before game day. So check that all out here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Later, speaking of videos on YouTube, it's time to get into T. Frank's first video demonstration. I can't believe this hasn't happened before. This kind of blows my mind that we have not ever done this, but here we are. There's no better time to do it than the Wednesday before the season starts to kick us into overdrive for the 2025 season. So let's dive in.
Yeah, okay. So I've been having this conversation all offseason about Zion Tracy. Is he a nickel? Is he a corner? Is he a safety? What is he? Why are we having this conversation? Is it a corner? Is it a safety? And I've been trying to lean into the idea that this is a safety position because of what it's been asked to do. And people keep saying, but is it a safety? Like on the roster, on the depth chart.
Right.
And from that player perspective, it doesn't matter. It matters what the job is. And also, James Franklin's been talking about how they've been running a 4-3, and they're going to a 4-2 this year. And again, everyone assumes 3 means 3 linebackers. And typically, yes, that's what it means. And honestly, this is me kind of context clues, kind of Blues cluesing this a little bit, of trying to give you an explanation. So, I don't share my all-22 film on YouTube for a couple of reasons, but one of them being, out of respect to the places that you receive it. And secondly, like also a lot of these things, they have monetization issues. So I just haven't really done these video things. I do them at bluewhiteillustrated.com. And also it's for subscribers there. But I wanted to show, here in this situation, and I'm hoping this works because it worked right before I went on. Let's see. Does this work now? Of course it doesn't. It worked right before we went on, and now it's not working. Oh, that's the worst. Okay, this is what I was worried about.
Well, walk me through it. If it was working, what would we be looking at here? Yeah.
Okay, so you see right here, you can probably see my cursor. This is the nickel position right here, and this is why we don't do things live without practicing them. So the nickel position is in this defense is who's ever lined up here in the slot. So you see your safeties up top, and you see your corners over here. You have 2 linebackers right here, as I draw arrows that I can totally see. But in a 4-3 defense, what it would mean for this player to be a cornerback versus a safety versus a linebacker. It's all about what that job is. So your nickel position in, let's say in old school 4-3 defenses, this would be the Sam linebacker. And the reason the third linebacker has gone away in football generally is because typically this here is now a receiver. So this is not a guy that a linebacker can cover. So now you need to make a decision. How are you going to change your defense to accommodate for that? Now, previously with Manny Diaz, what they did is they took this safety, moved him down here, and made him a linebacker and replaced this with a different safety. But this player down here never interacted with anything up here in this general area. In this defense, and last year this is the same thing. So Zion Tracy played the nickel. In man coverage, he would play this receiver in man coverage. But if they played zones, so you say you play a cover 3, this player goes back, this player shifts over, this player shifts over, and you have your 3 deep. You'd have your corner, he would play the flat over here, if you can see. Again, I hate that we can't. For some reason, it's not working right when I thought it was going to work. Okay, so in Jim Knowles' defense, this player can line up anywhere. He can line up here. He can line up here. He can line up here. The difference is this linebacker position in a 4-3 does not drop into deep coverages, into a deep half, into a deep third, or into a deep free safety position. They only play, unless there's extreme situations, inversions, different styles of play, this player only stays on the first level of the defense. Think of it as a linebacker. These guys are all on a string, and they just go left and right as far as whether you blitz, however you were going to try and do certain things. So that's the difference, is now this nickel player, this corner, can line up at the start of the play up here. And a lot of times that's what Jim Knowles will do. He'll have 3 safeties deep. Even though this is a nickel corner lining up right here, that player will then come down in. Maybe it's this player that comes down in. Maybe it's the free safety that comes down into the slot. But this nickel player can now play deep coverages. So that's the biggest difference in what Zion Tracy's going to do. He did not do that last year. In fact, when they wanted to do this, let's say that this was Jalen Reed, right? So this right here is Jalen Reed. What they would do is they'd put Jalen Reed down here, and they'd put Zion Tracy at this position. They would just flip their positions. They would not have those guys line up in a tandem deep situation. So Zion Tracy now, if this is going to be the defense that Jim Knowles showed us last year, can line up anywhere on the field. Fundamentally, that is different from what you saw previously under Manny Diaz or under Jim Knowles. Even though they were playing three safeties, Jalen Reed, the plan was to play him down here in the box as an underneath coverage defender. So this is when James Franklin was talking about yesterday, talking about coverage obscurity. If you have three guys lined up here, you have way more ability to rotate your safeties, to add them into the box and into the run fit from different places. So when we talk about what is this player here, this void right here in the defense, what are they responsible for? This player is now responsible for run defense into the box. They're responsible for man coverage over a receiver or a tight end in the slot, and they also can be responsible for a deep third, a deep half, or a deep quarter. So they're responsible for 3 levels of defense. That is a safety role. So this is what I'm saying when I say it doesn't matter whether or not it's a corner. The responsibility of the position is that of a safety. Because when you have to blitz, play the run, play a deep coverage, it is a full encompassing activity. And again, only safeties do that. Linebackers and slot corners don't do those things. Usually, as it used to be, nickel corners would come in on third down and they would play primarily man coverage. And what this does is it changes the defensive responsibility for that player in the base defense. So you now have your sub packages that you're going to practice are traditional 4-3s, where if you are going to play 3 linebackers on the field, you have to have a fundamentally different coverage set than if you were to play with a true 4-2 in this situation, where that player may not be there in the underneath coverage and you've got to make up for it somewhere else. Which again, when we're talking about, and this is the part where I think I haven't been as sharp as I should be in describing the Mike linebacker and the linebackers in general. Because in this defense, you are vacating a player a lot of times from that underneath coverage unit, which traditionally has 4 or 5 players in that underneath coverage unit. So you need to make up for that in different ways. And one of those is having the Mike linebacker play more in space. So if you're wondering why is Dom DeLuca the Mike linebacker, he used to be a safety. He used to play the Sam. So now when there's all that green grass out there and maybe he's cheating more outside of the box, it makes sense in that view of this particular defense that you want a guy at both the Will and the Mike linebacker that are going to have coverage strengths in their portfolio. Because you're not going to, even last year, Kobe King, he stayed between the tackles and he was really used as a zone defender or a spy on the quarterback or a very limited coverage role. He was good in those roles, but you saw what happened when you put him in man coverage or you flexed him out into a wide coverage. They are not going to protect the Mike linebacker in this particular defense, and that's why. Because you're going to have flexibility with where that nickel lines up, which to me is why when we were talking about King Mack and Zion Tracy, and why I asked James Franklin on Monday about Zion Tracy's tackling ability, that's why all of this conversation was framed the way it was. That player has to be good at tackling, because they are coming down from depth to make tackles at times. They are playing in the line of scrimmage more often because they're a safety position from a demand perspective of what they're playing. It's not about where they are on the roster. It's not about what it says next to their name, whether it's an S or a CB. It's on the field, what are the functions of what you're being asked to do? And for Zion Tracy, he's going to be asked to do much more this year than he was last year. And so better tackling and better deep coverage. He was not good at it last year because they never asked him to do it. And now he's been spending the offseason presumably learning how to do all these different things. And, they trust him to do that in the defense, which is why they move, one of the reasons I imagine they moved King Mack back to that other safety position where he's going to be playing more of a traditional role. And if I throw this back up here for everyone to see, let me just throw this out here for everyone to see. Over here, this is where Antoine Belgrave-Shorter is going to play as the starter. Here, this traditional safety role here, that is, at least if this is the template that we saw from Ohio State last year, that's going to be the Caleb Downs role. That is going to be Zakee Wheatley. So he's going to stay at his traditional place, and then you're going to have Zion Tracy at this nickel position, which floats between the two levels of the defense. That makes this player very important because now your field safety can play more in the box because you've got this other player to shift and motion around in the formation. They drop this player down into this area right here and make him a quasi linebacker. So you've got, as far as what I assume is going to be, Belgrave-Shorter, Zakee Wheatley, and then Zion Tracy over here as that third safety. So that's how all that stuff works together. And that's why that this defense is different, at least to my interpretation, what I watched in film this offseason, how I've seen this defense work at Ohio State over the last 3 years. That's really what's going on with this defense and how all the different pieces interact. So hopefully that adds some clarity to what you're going to see this weekend and to the very long and confusing conversation about what Zion Tracy is. Is he corner? Is he nickel? Does it matter? No. In the end, it does not matter to Penn State football fans, but from the schematic perspective of what the quarterback sees, it's very different. Greg, you're muted after that long tirade.
That's okay. There was some dog barking going on upstairs. I could not let anything get in the way of that very detailed explanation. No, it's a good question. It's a good thing to discuss because Zion Tracy is a guy who Penn State is going to rely on in ways that, as you just laid out, they didn't have to or didn't need to a year ago. And they also are going to ask him to do some things that impact the biggest games they play. So it's a good breakdown of what Penn State is going to ask him or anyone in that position to do. But as it relates to him, you asked James Franklin about him this week. Let's hear what James Franklin said about Zion Tracy at Monday's news conference to kick off Nevada week.
So a couple things. Zion, Woosley, and Dinkins, those three guys are playing the nickel position, and we feel really good about all three of them. But I think your point still is a fair one. Zion, like all these guys, are developing players and did some really good things from a coverage standpoint, did some really good things from a return standpoint. But, he's a young developing player who's getting better and continues to do that both in the run game and in the pass game. Experience counts. He's got a full year under his belt. He's bigger, stronger, faster. And I also think just schematically some of the things that we'll be asking not just Zion to do, but our whole defense to do is one of the big reasons why Jim is here. In terms of coverage diversity, so that we're not in a situation where people know we're in man coverage and then are giving us all man beaters. So all these things, whether it's coverage or whether it's run game, when you play a little bit more zone coverage and you have more defenders with their eyes on the quarterback or eyes on the ball, can allow you to be a better cover guy in terms of interceptions because you see the ball, but also be able to trigger in the run game more.
So James Franklin, T-Frank, I thought had one of his most insightful news conferences of his tenure at Penn State. And I don't think that's hyperbole to say that. It was very insightful, very in-depth with his answers. And the reason I bring that up is there's times when he will answer a question that has nothing to do with a previous one, and yet it will make you think of that question and the answer to it. And as I was listening to him talk about that question you asked about Zion Tracy, it kept coming back to when he talked about Jim Knowles and bringing him in to have more answers. And those are the kind of answers I'm not trying, not the press conference answer, but what he's talking about within it, the coverage, diversity and things like that. Those are the kind of answers he felt Penn State needed. And he thought Jim Knowles was the right guy to do it. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that very conversation from earlier this year with him as it relates to where he's at with Zion Tracy and just his defense overall.
And that's what we just discussed. Yeah, that's exactly what we just discussed, where It's both schematic and decision making, right? So the flexibility of this third safety position, this nickel corner, to be able to float between those two levels, which I thought we were getting with Jim Knoll or with Tom Allen. I thought we were getting that. That's why I was kind of excited for that defense last year when they said they were going to play three safeties. That is not what we got. That is what we're getting this year, unless they're. I mean, I can't imagine they're not. Like, that's what they're going to do this year, because that's why James Franklin has emphasized these things. For the quarterback and for the play caller of the opposing team, it's that post-snap, things can look radically different than they did pre-snap. But also, and I wrote about this on Monday night for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, I also went into kind of the predictability of what Tom Allen called. This is the defense that's going to run 4 coverages, 5 coverages throughout the season. And that is going to lead to last year, Penn State essentially ran 2. You can maybe throw in a third in certain situations. On third downs, they ran 2 coverages. One was a man coverage and one was a zone coverage. So if you knew what was coming, you could then attack the weakness of that coverage just based on traditional football disciplines and ideas. And that was his point about Zion Tracy, put in a bad spot a couple of times, reading between the lines there of what James Franklin said. That's why he missed some of those tackles, is because, he was in a position where he was trying to then recover from the offense attacking him and a weakness of that defense. Now, if you're lining up 10 yards deep, you can make tackles easier because you can square up easier. And if you're not in man coverage, you're not getting picked and rubbed, then you're not out of position. So Zion gets better. There's kind of a 3-layered answer. He gets better because he's bigger, faster, stronger, older. The defense is better, and he'll be put in a better position by said defense. So that's kind of the conversation of how he thinks that Zion Tracy is going to improve overall this year from an issue where he missed a lot of tackles last year. Like, James Franklin acknowledged that. He certainly missed tackles, and those are some of the reasons why, and some of the fixes that they wanted to get with Jim Knowles.
Speaking of missed tackles, Zach with another super chat donation. Zach, thank you for that. Said, as someone who went to school with Tony Rojas, does he make a big enough impact on the team to make the NFL? I'm not being sarcastic with the missed tackle thing. I think I've been pretty clear here throughout the offseason about how I think his injury situation is not talked about enough when it comes to some of the struggles in play he had a year ago. I don't know if you're asking, does he make a big enough impact on this team to leave early, or if you just mean in general. But yeah, I think he's sitting on a big season. What that means for his pro prospects going into the 2026 NFL draft, I think it's too early to speculate about that. Yeah. But as an NFL talent overall, at some point, I don't think there's any question.
So he's got the physical ability. Yeah, he's got the physical ability to be a guy who leaves as a junior and is drafted fairly high in the NFL draft. What will determine that, as Greg just said, is how he performs this year. This defense isn't necessarily set up for linebackers to make TFLs and make splash plays. Brett asked, do you expect to see an uptick in TFLs then for Zaki this year? No, I'd say an uptick in tackles. I would say that he'll be around the ball more, but this defense doesn't sell out for negative plays. They're more traditional in what they ask of the linebackers. Now, I think you could see an uptick in the number of tackles that Tony Rojas is able to acquire. Stops, maybe not tackles for loss, but a 2nd and 8 after a 2-yard gain, that's a win for the offense. Now, does it go down as a positive stat as a TFL? No. But it does go down as a win for the defense, putting you in 3rd and long. And I think that that's entirely possible. He could rack up more tackles and be a guy that has a high number if they're on the field enough. Like, this is the problem. There's always the stats. There's always the numbers that can be misleading. And so I don't think this defense necessarily emphasizes any of the flashy stats. It's about control, and it's about stopping the offense in a bunch of different ways. Not necessarily in 1 or 2 ways of tackles for loss, sacks, and then 3rd down pressure interceptions like we've seen previously.
Right. Well, we're going to talk some more about the Penn State defense as we roll into our game week preview. Penn State, Nevada, as we mentioned earlier, coming up at 3:30 on CBS. The Nittany Lions are a massive favorite in this game, as you would expect that to be the case for every non-conference game. That's the wrong button I clicked. We have a Penn State Nevada preview. There it is. That looks a lot better. No news update. Sorry if I made anyone panic there for just a second. No news update, just some Penn State Nevada talk on deck. If you don't know a lot about the Wolfpack, Jeff Choate's their second-year head coach. They have 50-plus transfers on the team this year. I think they're bringing something like, 50-plus new players, not transfers, 50-plus new players. I think it's 54 total. I don't want to say it's half freshmen, half transfers, but it's probably in that ballpark. A lot of new guys at the key positions. It's almost all transfers. I watched his news conference on Monday, T. Frank. He was very complimentary of his freshmen. I think they're going to play a lot. Of course, when you have that many new guys, somebody has to play. So I don't want to get too far into the deep end about these Nevada freshmen. But I think that obviously, when you host Nevada for the first time, Penn State fans are expecting this to be a walk in the park. And I think James Franklin did make a fair point. Now, it's not going to change how we'll view this if Penn State does not cruise to victory. But it is hard for them to maybe game plan for Nevada to some extent. Now, again, there's so many talent edges. There's only so much game planning in theory you should have to do. But it is hard to also talk about Nevada and write about Nevada and have conversations at the water cooler, the bar, the walking trail, whatever it might be about Nevada, because they have so many new guys in new spots and ones that come from all different levels of college football. So a really interesting team coming here, T. Frank. They're picked to finish last in the Mountain West, according to the preseason poll out there. I'm not sure if that's coach vote or media vote. I'm not sure how that works. But either way, there's some interesting pieces on this team to make me think that at least when they get to conference play, they might just be a little bit better than people think. This is a team that I hate going back to last year's stats with a group that has 55 new players. But at the same time, they lost 6 one-score games last year. And you look at them and say, wow, they must have been awful. They were 3-9. They pushed SMU to the brink at one point last year and 6 one-score losses. So I think they got a bunch of new guys in hoping to erase some of those small differences that led to the losses, 6-1 score. And we'll see. But in terms of this game overall, just how interested are you in seeing a Mountain West opponent come to Beaver Stadium for the first time? I think clearly we're all more focused on what the Penn State guys do, but just kind of interested in this whole opponent situation Penn State has for its opener.
Yeah, I think that there are certain things that can change and certain things that can't change to a certain degree when it comes to an opponent. So Nevada runs a scheme that Penn State is going to see throughout the year because it's a pretty traditional college football scheme. From the defensive side of the ball, they run that last year, and this is where when you have 50 different players, you can change what you call more or less, right? But last year, if you're building a program, maybe you're not doing that. They run a quarters system, meaning 2 high safeties with a specific way those players interact with the offense. Don't want to get into all of this too deeply, but essentially it means that they're going to keep an extra player away from the line of scrimmage, and they're going to prioritize keeping a lid on the deep passing attack. Now, Penn State's seen these last year. If you ever saw Amari Evans catch a deep touchdown, it was most likely against quarters.
You just had to get people going on that, didn't you? Just had to use that example. Anyone on the roster could have been used, and you just had to go there. Well, I get it.
But no, this is the point. So this is kind of what I'm interested in is who's going to be that guy if they're going to do that this year against this particular scheme, because the way you can manipulate those 2 safeties, they have both run and pass responsibilities in this particular coverage. And because they are lined up away from the line of scrimmage, you have more stress on those players to make a decision whether it's run or pass. So play action is really important. Also, you can manipulate where they are on the field based on formation and the receiver that is lined up in the slot against the safety, because what they do is outside is number 1, inside is number 2. If you're lining up a receiver, the outside is number 1, the inside is number 2. The safeties take the number 2 guy. And so if that number 2 guy is, I don't know, Tyler Warren, and he runs 12 yards and then turns around, that safety triggers down to cover that guy. And then you got Amari Evans running a post into a voided zone on the other side. Boom, touchdown. So that's what could happen in this game, but you've changed so many players. Is that what you're going to do? How is Penn State going to attack in this game? The other thing is if you run that against Penn State, who has such a massive advantage in the trenches, the run game should be there all day long. And so yes, it does not matter who the players are on the other side because Penn State can run their base offense, but it also should show you if they do run what they did last year, Penn State's working off the same information as far as what was on film. There are these ways to attack them, and we'll find out how Penn State wants to attack these things in the future based on this particular game. So to me, the opponent does not matter. It's what do they like to do, and how does Penn State want to attack that? Because I think they will use that those schemes and formations and ideas to practice those against this team so that they're better at it later in the year.
Nevada defensive coordinator, and I'm just pulling up their pronunciation guy because it is the same as Vanga, but it's pronounced differently. Kane Ione is in his second year as the team's defensive coordinator. They have, again, a lot of new here. Thomas Witt is their best defensive lineman. He is a defensive tackle. You'll see him and hear his name on Saturday. A couple others you're going to hear, A.J. Odoms, cornerback, and Mervyn Kenyon III. They are both transfers, and they're on Phil Steele's preseason All-American team, let me get this again. All MWC preseason teams is what those two defensive backs find themselves on. And so, again, I'm curious to see what this team does later in the year. Obviously, not so much in this matchup, or if we are worried about what they're doing in this matchup, things are in a horrible position for Penn State. But yeah, you're right. Clearly, you want to see what Penn State just does, and more so down the depth chart, I think, compared to the starters. But just in live action, again, there's only so much you can do to recreate all of this, game-like settings and game-like factors and things like that in practice. It's just the reality of the situation. So no matter who you're playing, the chance to see you do it against somebody else at the level you're expected to is always something that's interesting, especially this time of year when you know that the Oregon game is exactly 1 month from today. And that's what, of course, the start of this Penn State season, assuming things go the way they are supposed to go against this non-conference schedule, really starts. And that's when the first test will be. So, I think that's probably about as much as we need to say about the Nevada defense and the Penn State offense. We've covered this in detail throughout the offseason. But, yeah, and certainly, I'll just run through the list quick. We want to see the receivers, right? Who's running certain routes, but just in general. I have bold predictions coming on Friday. I started them this morning, and I have a prediction for who makes the first catch as a Penn State receiver. I'm not sure everyone's going to like it, but again, that dollar deal is in effect for the next week if you want to go find out who I think could do that. But curious to see that group, the tight ends, and obviously what Nick Singleton and Katron Allen look like in year 4, but their first understand Drayton. So that has my interest as well. And then obviously Drew Allard. So a lot to watch for. Offensive line combinations. I think we're going to learn more than we think we're going to learn. And maybe maybe that's an obvious statement, but I do feel like there's a certain vibe of these, whatever, it's Nevada, 44.5 point favorite or whatever it is. And I just think we're going to learn more about this team on Saturday than what I think at the moment people are giving them credit for.
So this is where this is, given what's going on in the chat right now, this is going to be ironic to talk about, but this is what we're paid to do, Greg, is we're paid to go in there and, like, a Penn State fan watches the game, they see, what the final score is, and they yawn, right? Of course, that was not a competitive game. We didn't learn anything. But you and I, who have been following this intently, that's what we're here to do, is to notice the differences, the changes, and the most important things. So, like, me giving you that 20-minute diatribe about Zion Tracy as the nickel and then what Nevada does and how Penn State can attack it, those are the things we're going to learn. And we're going to tell you about those, like, either live during the game, during the post-game show, or in our analysis and our wrap-up of the game. So just, again, an example of why you should subscribe to Blue White Illustrated. If you want to know those things, if you want to get deeper into the knowledge of what's going on with the team and how that projects forward, that's where, other than did they execute the assignment and just out-athlete somebody, which they're not going to do later in the season, like, we can't predict that. We can show you, like, hey, here's what we did learn from these games. The part that I do think, Greg, that is harder to learn is what the offense is going to be, because the quarterback last year was so bad. Yeah. They ran the quarterback option so many times as basically a cheat code because other parts of the offense didn't work. Right. That I don't know what Chuba Purdy brings to the table as far as a passer or what they want their passing game to be, outside the fact that it's a lot of options, RPOs, things like that, where it's very simplified. I don't know necessarily on that side of the ball what it's going to look like. So what's Penn State going to do to counter that, because I don't think Nevada has shown that yet, because the quarterback they wanted to have last year was hurt. So there are certain things you do just to get through a game. And on the flip side, Greg, I wanted to talk about this. Kind of the preview of this game. Andy Kotelnicki, James Franklin, I'm going to say even probably Nick Dawkins at some point, has talked about Drew Aller, his transformation as an athlete, presumably not just to scramble, but as a runner. So, like, on the flip side of that conversation, you don't call a play, let's say a read option, where the quarterback has the option to keep the ball. You don't call that play unless you expect the quarterback in the right situations and circumstances to keep the football. Right. Otherwise, you just call a straight run play. Penn State is not shy about doing those things. I'm curious to see, like, how much does Drew Aller run in this game? Do we see that new evolution of the offense from that perspective of who's the new Tyler Warren? Well, what if it's just a larger percentage of the actual quarterback running the football? That's, to me, in this game, what I find interesting talking about the Nevada, the matchup with Nevada. Is it worth it in this particular game to call it like any other game, or are there, like, is there a restrictor plate on how much Aller is going to actually be involved in the run game?
Right. And I think, again, there's some parts of this offense we're truly, I don't think, going to learn everything about until we get into the Big Ten portion of the schedule. But we can learn some of that this week, of course, when Penn State takes on Nevada. Let's flip over to the offense here as we get into the final quarter of the show. David Culberson is the offensive coordinator for Nevada. He comes from a background of learning and coaching under Joe Moorhead. He was with Joe Moorhead at Oregon and at Akron. Now is the first-year play caller for Nevada. And you mentioned that Chubba Purdy, journeyman, former four-star recruit turned journeyman college quarterback, is the starter this year for Nevada. Was just okay last year. Some names you'll hear: Herschel Turner, top running back. He's a transfer. Marcus Bellin is the top returning pass catcher. He'll be involved with kick returns as well. And Nate Burleson II plays for Nevada. So if you want to feel, no matter what age you are, or if you're older than us, younger than us, whatever it may be, the same age, I think everyone looks at that and says, that Nate Burleson, right? No, it's that Nate Burleson. And he's a bit of a field stretcher for this Nevada team. So Penn State defensively against this Nevada offense, what you looking for?
Against the Nevada offense? Yeah, that's the part of where I don't necessarily know with the passing game what Chubba Purdy can do from a passing perspective that they didn't have access to last year, because he was plan A, and they had to play somebody else. So they run a lot of quarterback option. And I know Purdy is an athlete, so that's going to be part of it. And so you counter that by having more players near the box. So you have more of your safeties playing near the line of scrimmage. So this is a game where everything we just said about Zion Tracy probably doesn't matter in this game, because the way you counter an option is to take away that with bodies. The way you counter the run game is to add more into the box. Now, the point then is if you draw more players in the box, you're supposed to be able to go over the top and attack a defense with vertical games or finding the holes in the defensive secondary, because they've allocated so many resources to stopping the multiple options near the line of scrimmage. I don't think Penn State secondary is going to be very stressed. Just a quick thought there. And also, I don't think that Jim Knowles is going to cave to the idea that he's going to put more bodies in the box to stop the run. If you go back and watch, Notre Dame did that in the championship game. And the first drive, everyone said, oh, man, they crammed it down their throats. The fact they had to run the quarterback on 4th and 1, like 3 times on that drive, to me, when I see that, schematically, that looks like desperation. That looks like, we don't feel like we can throw the ball against this team. And you saw, as the game went on and the lead got bigger, they couldn't. Like, that was kind of the death knell for the Notre Dame offense. Similar here. I don't think Jim Knowles is going to bring extra guys in the box, so you're going to see how these safeties interact in the run game, how they can fly from different angles and add in and stop the run with fewer bodies, because that is the goal of a 4-2-5. Is to stop the run with allocating fewer guys near the line of scrimmage so you can take away the pass. To do that, you need to control the line of scrimmage with fewer players, especially along the defensive line. So this is a big game from that perspective. Also, not going to be a test of whether they can do it later in the season. So I think there's less to learn against Nevada's offense. When you don't face an actual passing threat, a lot of these things become inconsequential.
Regardless of all that, you kind of ruined the idea I had going here when you just said, basically, yeah, I don't think we're going to learn a lot. D-line struggled to be gap sound last year, partially due to emphasis on getting to the quarterback. Do you expect a heavy focus on being more gap sound? Question of the day.
Yes, absolutely. That is, Jim Knowles is a stickler for that. That's kind of the difference is aggressiveness to get into the backfield created some of those issues. And I would say there was less attention to detail than there was with Manny Diaz of, you got to be in this gap, here's how you do it, and we're going to do all this chaotic stuff. They still had the chaotic stuff, but they had a little bit less discipline last year. So for me, yes, I expect more gap discipline and fewer of those mental errors. That's why the 3 linebackers that Penn State has on that Jim Knowles discussed, those are the ones they trust, because those are the guys who are going to be gap sound and accountable. So I think that's going to be a major difference in this defense this year. But the trade-off, stylistically, theoretically, is fewer tackles for loss. So we'll see how that plays out throughout the rest of the season.
All right. Z-Man has a good question to segue to our final segment of the day. How many times will Nevada cross the 50-yard line, over or under? I would hate answering this question without doing a little bit more research, but I'm going to go with 5. And that is just purely I looked at the clock and we were at the 55-minute mark of the show and I said 5. We were at 56. I might have said 6. So let's go with 5
Okay.
on the over under. We'll set it at 5.5. I'll take the under and we'll see what happens. But I don't know. It'll probably end up being more than that, quite honestly. I think that between the newness of this Penn State defense and what Nevada may have that we don't know about, that may be a little bit shiftier or twitchier than we're expecting. I think there could be not, if you cross the 50, but then take a 10-yard sack, did you really cross the 50? But in terms of counting for the sake of counting, we'll see. I'll take the under on the 5.5. All right. Best bet segment coming up to end the show. I've never seen this intro, so you're going to watch it along with me and T. Frank as we get into our picks to end this show, the PWI live show on Wednesday, August 27th. Podcast, YouTube shows, they all have them a best bet segment and then a big disclaimer. So let's get to it. As you all know by now, BWI has teamed with Bet MGM this season. We'll be using Bet MGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. When you join Bet MGM, you get access to a variety of parlay selection features like same-game parlays, live betting options, and more. So if you haven't signed up for Bet MGM yet, use bonus code ON3, ON capitalized, the number 3. And you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Works like this. Download the BetMG app and sign up with bonus code ON3, ON3, capital letters on the ON and the number 3. Deposit at least 10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. If your bet loses, just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Disclaimer, see betmgm.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not valid in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. That's 1-800-327-50. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. And 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not with non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, ON capitalized and the number 3, and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. All right, let's get into some best bets. We're going to start with Penn State and Nevada. Nittany Lions at Bet MGM are a 45.5-point favorite. The total, last I looked, was 56.5. Both of those numbers have dropped a little bit. When I put together the start of our Monday game preview, which posts each week at 7 a.m. over at blueillustrate.com on Monday, I believe those numbers were at 46.5 and 57.5. So both come down a little bit. Best bet for me, though, in this game, T. Frank's going to be Penn State laying the 44.5. We know James Franklin and this Penn State team like to cover large spreads. They have certainly been in position before where they score late to get over the hump of the point spread. So I feel pretty good about this one. I don't think it's going to be a shutout. We'll show the picks tomorrow on the Thursday edition of BWI Live, but I like Penn State to cover this number. Could get a little sketchy late, but think it'll be okay.
Have you put in your pick yet? I haven't even thought about it.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, of course you have. You did it probably the minute the doc was made. Yeah, I'm going to say Penn State covers this. I think the offense is loaded. The point this year is to be ruthlessly explosive. That's why Stan Drayton is here. That's why they went and got receivers. This offense is going to put up 66 points. Like, that's kind of where my mind is. That's kind of the ballpark. I haven't formulated my full-on final score, but that's where I think. So I think that they cover this for sure.
All right. Next one for me is the game of the week in college football, or at least one of them. But to me, it's the game of the week for sure. I'm assuming most of you agree. I'm going to Ohio State, Texas, and I am looking at the under at that game. In that game, right now, BetMGM has it at 47.5 points. And I looked, according to the BetMGM percentages, most of the action is on the over. I get it, especially with Arch Manning making his debut. Yeah. Here's the thing. Both teams lost plenty, especially in terms of playmaking on offense. They both have first-time starting quarterbacks. Arch Manning goes into a hostile environment for the first time. Julian Sayin starts against a Texas defense that should be darn good. And I just can't see the scoreboard lighting up in this game. So I like the under 47.5. 24-20 gets me there. And I think it could be maybe even a little bit less than that. But 24-20, 24-21 both get the job done for me.
Interesting. Two first-time starting quarterbacks. Is that kind of going into your thought there?
Yeah.
Like you got two first-time. I'll buy that. I also don't know, as you mentioned, the receivers for this is the thing is like that Texas offense has the opportunity to be explosive.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to put 48 up on their own against an Ohio State defense that's probably good. But yeah, I think that's fair. Is it cautious out the gates? We're not going for a barn burner, Ohio State, Texas. So we got the last one here, Ohio at Rutgers. At first, I thought it was Ohio State at Rutgers when I was reading this. I'm like, of course we're going to be talking about that, but Ohio at Rutgers. What in the world is compelling you to watch Ohio at Rutgers, or at least be interested in it?
15.5 points for the Bobcats are, T. Frank. I just think Ohio keeps this game within 2 touchdowns. This is by far the one I have. I've had the least amount of confidence in this game, but I think Ohio, just looking at the MAC, has a chance to make some noise this year, like some long-term bets related to them. And I think they keep this game within 2 touchdowns. So if you want to give me 15.5, I will take it. That gives me a little bit of cushion. So I don't expect anyone to watch this contest but me. But hey, we'll see. Probably have to catch a replay. I'm not even sure what time it starts, but I would have guessed it's probably the same time as either Texas, Ohio State, or Nevada. But that's where I'm at. Those are this week's best bets from Bet MGM.
All right, Greg. Awesome. Love to have that back. Next week, we're going to have a little bit more graphic interplay so you can see some of this stuff on the screen. But I love the fact that Best Bets is back. I don't know anything he just said. Honestly, I don't understand gambling. I don't understand lines. I don't understand a lot of this stuff. So take Greg's advice, and I'm just going to be here as the pretty face on the other side. And by the way, if you want me to, Greg, I will use my radio powers to read the disclaimer in the future so we can get through that a little bit faster.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as thinking of your career as I was reading that and thinking we may have to make some alterations to our plan there. All right, this has been another edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. Here's the plan. We have practice tonight, updates coming at bluewhiteillustrated.com. James Franklin's final news conference before Penn State takes on Nevada on Saturday is coming tonight here on the YouTube channel. And on Thursday, Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz join T. Frank to get you ready for a recruiting from the recruiting perspective, rather, of Penn State, Nevada, as the Nittany Lions get ready to end the dead period and welcome recruits back to State College for the first time at Beaver Stadium on Saturday. For Thomas Frank Carr, I'm Greg Pickel. We'll catch you next time on another edition of BWI Live.